I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender. Capella University is rethinking higher education. With its game-changing FlexPath learning format, you can earn your degree on your schedule and fit your education seamlessly into your life. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
It's all how you look at it. We only have control over our attitudes, our outlook, and our effort. It took about a year of denial for me to realize that no money was ever coming, and I was just digging myself deeper into debt. When I got to that $80,000 of debt and realized that, shit, I don't have any way to pay this, and I have no outs. I don't know what to do. It was the scariest situation of my life, and I isolated myself from everybody. I avoided people because I not only owed the bank money, I owed friends money. I owed people money like that I cared about. I didn't want to be that guy who ran away. Somebody just ran away on me, and I didn't want to be that guy. But I ended up spending 2 weeks in bed and just medicating and avoiding the world, and that wasn't helping. And then until I eventually had my adult moment where I was like, no one's going to save the day. I got to figure this out. And I'm going to be honest, I heard about this guy named James Altucher who got rich and then went broke and got rich again and then went broke. And as I said, I read your story and I was like, this is the first guy who's just honest about it and who's not embarrassed. And that was one of the first steps, you know, in me just telling people, like, I fucked up. I don't know what I did, but I don't know what to do, but I fucked up. I focused on taking personal responsibility. I didn't see any value anymore in feeling like a victim. I think for a long time, I enjoyed the pity that I got. I enjoyed people feeling sorry for me. But now I got to a point where people's pity isn't going to pay the bills. You know, people's empathy isn't going to help me move further right now. I need to take all the responsibility I can.
You know, it's interesting because you look at stories of successful people or, you know, people who are striving for success. No one ever says, man, what really made me a success was being a victim.
Yeah.
I really took that victim thing and just took it to the top.
Yeah, I ran with it. Everyone felt sorry for me and they just hit me with bags of money.
Yeah, like victimhood is never a strategy.
Yeah.
Audio rolling.
Okay, I'll officially start then.
All right. Perfect.
So, just talking to the listeners for a second. I got a book a month ago from a publisher saying, hey, maybe you want to read this book. It might be interesting for a podcast. And I get books like that from publishers probably every day. And most of the books I just don't read because I am either interested in reading other books or I'm preparing for podcast guests or reading their books. But anyway, I got this book called Unlearn by Humble the Poet, 101 Simple Truths for a Better Life. And I started reading it and I loved it. And I was thinking, who is this guy, Humble the Poet? And then A few days after that, I got an email from a good friend of mine, Jay Shetty, who I'm on his podcast coming in June. And he introduced me to Humble and suggested, hey, maybe you might want to have this guy on your podcast. He has a book coming out. And I'm like, I know, I read the book. It's great. So we worked it out. And Humble, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Very, 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 very. Thank you a lot.
So not only, first off, let me explain why this book. So I started. You'll see. I started bookmarking and making notes and stuff. But I was bookmarking every single chapter, so that's a problem.
And every chapter is only 2 pages, so you're pretty much folding every other page.
Right. So I don't even. This is going to be an interesting structure because what am I going to do? Talk to you about? There's 101 chapters. And I have every chapter bookmarked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomly open the different chapters and we'll talk about them. But you're also such an interesting person. Like you have a very popular YouTube channel where you have videos where you're doing, you have like rap videos, you have spoken word poetry, you have funny videos. You've done some stuff with Lily Singh, who's a really huge YouTuber. Also from Toronto, right?
We started out together.
Yeah, you were like living together, right?
We lived together in LA, yeah.
Why'd you live together in LA? By the way, she's the only YouTuber where I've seen billboards advertising her in New York City, which I thought was like a really creative strategy for a YouTuber to use the most raw offline advertising.
1000%. It was so analog. I loved it. Yeah.
Why did she do that?
So we to answer the first question, we started living in LA together to split the Airbnb costs. You know, we were out there trying to make stuff happen, and she was in comedy, and I was focused primarily in music. And more people like comedy than hip hop music. And her,
I don't know if that's true.
I mean, everyone loves to laugh. Not everybody can follow along to the lyrics.
This
is what I tell myself to justify why her stuff took off so quick.
Well, I think comedy on YouTube, like I don't know, there's very few, you would know better than me, but there's very few rappers I think who broke out on YouTube alone. There's like Macklemore perhaps with Thrift Shop.
Potentially, yeah. I think Anderson .Paak right now too.
Oh, I don't know him. And
You will. Give it another year.
Do you know Mac Lethal?
No.
Okay, so he's an interesting one for you to check out.
Okay, I'll definitely check him out.
He's gotten millions of views. He does extremely fast rapping. It's very unusual.
Okay.
But he's not in any scene. He's like in Kansas City.
Oh, that's dope.
Yeah. So, but I think more comedians break out on Twitter and YouTube than musicians.
You're right. It's easier to consume, I believe, as well. And they gave her the billboard. It was YouTube that started they had a special program, and she was their top pick. And they had bus ads, billboards. They painted her on the side of buildings in New York, but it was also in Australia.
I see. So YouTube paid for those.
Yeah, YouTube went ahead and did a big,
did they work?
Push.
I know this has nothing to do with your book, but I'm just curious.
Oh, no. I mean, it's very difficult. I thought the reason the digital age came to fruition was because advertisers were like, "How do I know if my billboard worked? What's the ROI on that, or how do you even measure it?"
Right.
So I felt like it was a little bit of YouTube's way to kind of flex into the real world, saying, "Hey, we exist everywhere now." And for her, it definitely did, because what ended up happening was she was also on billboards on like Sunset in LA. And whenever in her early years, when she came across celebrities or went to parties, they would all be like, "Oh, I've seen your billboard."
That's so funny, because I guess maybe people in LA notice billboards because that's how like a movie is almost released. It's like billboard first, and then the movie comes out. Do you remember any billboards you've ever seen in your life?
I mean, I guess they exist for a reason, whether we remember them or not. I always think about that even with like naming rights over an arena or a stadium. You're just like, why did, in Toronto, Scotiabank just took over, our arena where the Raptors play. And it's like, or MetLife Center or like all these other places. And it's kind of like, I guess it goes into our subconscious. I don't think advertisers are spending all this money thinking it doesn't work. I feel like when YouTube did it, I mean, YouTube is the child of Google, and Google is kind of like a money printing machine.
Well, but you make an interesting point that what they're doing is not even necessarily advertising. They're more like signaling, hey, we're everywhere.
We're
everywhere you open your eyes, we exist.
Yeah, our creators are as credible as our creators are just as credible as the ones you're going to see in these movie billboards. And she was in Times Square. Like, they put billboards up in some of the digital billboards were for 3 hours.
I
in
saw
Times
them
Squares.
everywhere. And on Lafayette Street, I saw a billboard. I lived right on Lafayette, so I kept seeing her billboard every time I walked out of my apartment. But
and the timing was also around. They had something called Brandcast, which is I think the first week of May every year, which is they invite all the big brands to come and talk and learn about digital advertising. So like that year, she was the host, and what I also heard was the route for all the special guests to go to the venue had multiple billboards to kind of show it up. And then you'd have the CEO of Toyota come and talk about how their sales improved when they started advertising on YouTube. And it was one of those as well. So I think it was a really big, let's take over the city, flood it. And there was a couple other creators that had their own billboards as well. Let's flood the city with these billboards and let people know this is the new generation of celebrities and influencers. And these are the people that you should be giving your endorsements to.
It's so interesting how these things evolve because we're living in this world where all media, all marketing, all advertising, it's not that it's changing, it's that it changes every day.
Yeah.
Like there's no strategy. It's almost like quantum mechanics. Like if you observe a strategy working, it's not gonna work anymore.
Yeah, by the time it works, it's already played out.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of this as I'm thinking of a structure of this podcast. I want to keep going back and forth to your book and your story.
Yeah.
Because I think they interweave with each other. But just in general, I so often read self-help books and I think to myself, this is not helping myself.
Yes.
Like it's just like I'm not really. It's like this guy read it in another book and now he's writing it because he wants to be a life coach or something, and I hate it. And then I put it down.
I don't want to be a life coach.
No, I know that. I can tell. And a lot of these lessons in the book, well, first off, let's start with the cover. The book's called Unlearn, and you were a school teacher.
Yes.
So let's start with that. Boom, school teacher to unlearning.
Okay, yeah, I was an elementary school teacher. The patterns of my life that I just recently discovered was I was always leaning to the path of least resistance. And I did really well in school. I didn't struggle in school. And then when I got to university, it's a little bit more effort than academic when you got to do well. And I wasn't performing as well. I went from being an A student to a C student, and then scrambling to figure out what am I going to do after I graduate? Like, how do people get employed and make money? And just through attending different youth camps as a kid and volunteering with them when I became a teenager, my sister's like, hey, you should be a teacher. You're already really good with kids, and it seems like a fun gig, and I think you'll dig it. And then I got some friends to give me some fake volunteer hours. I applied within a month, and I got in. And I'm sure it was a combination of my creative writing in my applications, a little bit of reverse racism, dropping the word representation over and over to get in.
But what do you mean? Like,
at this
give me a
point-
sentence with the word representation in it. Use representation in a sentence.
Are there any alternate pronunciations? In the context of teaching in Toronto being one of the most, is the most diverse city in the planet, and them needing teachers that reflected the population, and gone were the days where everybody had a 60-year-old white lady as their teacher, and we needed some, especially in elementary school, there was a lack of ethnic representation, but also lack of males. So people were telling me, like, a male minority, you're a lottery ticket. Like, it's going to be a shoo-in for you to get into teachers college and get employed. And they were right. I got hired. I got a full-time gig a month before I graduated, while most people in my class took about 4 years to get the same thing.
Wow. So like that's got to be frustrating to graduate teachers college and then not being able to get a job where you're not really paid that well to begin with.
Yeah, it's also there's a lot of supply and demand. Living in Toronto, you're an hour away from Buffalo. Buffalo had a college, Medaille College, and they had a special teachers program where you pretty much could buy your way through it, and it was super expensive. So a lot of people went to Medaille, and they traveled back and forth. So we had a lot of supply that never met the demand. And, government cutbacks are always cutting teachers' jobs. And normally that just becomes a hiring freeze. So it got more and more difficult to get a full-time position. And at that point, in the beginning, I was like, wow, I'm so fortunate. But then I remembered, like, I made big mistakes in my job interview. I just I realized that they also realized that I looked like the kids. I taught in the same neighborhood I grew up in. And it was important. And now looking back, it was an important situation. But I was never the most effective teacher. I was never the hardest working. I would never go out of my way and stay super late to do some work. Or
Why?
Didn't excite me. I think I enjoyed being with the kids. I didn't know that there was going to be a lot of politics and work before and after the bell. All of that really turned me off to the job. Every single year, things got more and more difficult. The thing with a teacher is a natural teacher. A natural teacher, when they teach a child and the child doesn't get it, the teacher takes the responsibility. Like, I'm not delivering it correctly. What am I doing wrong? And what I realized was that idea of if something's not working, always take the onus can also be exploited. So what was happening is our administration would be like, okay, well, we're going to have to cut one teacher and now everyone's classes are going to get a little bit bigger. But I believe in you guys. You guys can do it. Mm-hmm. Hey, the government mandated this new test that we have to do. It's going to take a week out of your program, but I know we can do it. And making teachers feel like if I can't get all this extra work done, then I'm failing as a teacher. Whereas I was looking at it as like, they're just making this harder every single year. And this is just sucking out the fun.
Harder for the teachers, harder for the students.
Harder for the teachers, harder for the students. They were setting us up for failure. I had a class one year. I had 35 kids, and I only had 25 hooks for their jackets. And this is Canada with thick, snow pants, snow boots, and winter jackets. So you couldn't even tell two kids to like pair up and share a hook. And it's being like, how are you guys setting me up for this? Like, how am I supposed to teach these kids when they're sitting on top of each other and we don't even have enough resources for everybody? And most teachers are expected to come out of pocket to buy basic essentials for them. And then the kids are expected to sell chocolates to raise additional money for field trips. And this is a brand new immigrant neighborhood where even when the parents can't afford to buy these chocolates or can't afford to help with the fundraisers, they'll never admit it. Because their pride is there. They don't want you to know that they can't afford these things.
And I don't know how it is in Canada, but the U.S. has been literally overrun with standardized tests. So every kid is taught to the test. Mm-hmm. So if I would see with my own kids, they would do art and painting and dancing all summer, and then school would start, and it was like the life would drain out of their face because now it's just all stay up till 2 a.m. This might be on the standardized test. This might be on homework. It's just, I felt like, I hate to say high school's bad for kids or school is bad, but I kind of think there must be better ways of learning at this point because everything's been so formulaic for one type of person maybe.
Yeah, it's become templated. And I mean, these all start with somebody with a beautiful philosophy. Like a teacher would come up with the philosophy of, hey, if I can figure out how to take a C+ student and make them into a B student, I can take those strategies and bring everyone one level above to wherever they are, whether that's turning a D student into a D- or whether that's turning a student to an A+ student. And then it'll start getting standardized. And then everybody will put their opinions into it. And then it turns into this big standardized test. In Canada, we called it, in Ontario, where I was teaching, we called it EQAO. And they had to write it in the 3rd grade, the 6th grade, and the 10th grade. And it would be a whole month out of the school year to prep them and get them to write this.
And they're so stressed. It's like these 15-year-olds so stressed about this stupid
And I was
test.
teaching 8-year-olds who were stressed out about it.
Ugh,
and
horrible.
Their parents were stressed out about it. And I tried to explain to the parents, I'm like, listen, you write the test in May, you're not going to get your results back until October. Your kid is going to be in grade 4 and forgot they even wrote this test. And they're going to get 3 simple marks. You're going to get a reading, writing, and a math mark. And the mark is going to say, at grade level, below grade level, or above grade level. They're not going to get anything else, no detailed analysis of who they are as a person or anything. And this data is not used to assess your kid. This data is used in collection of all data to help schools figure out where they rank in terms of funding, in terms of what they're supposed to allocate their budget to next year. So if that year kids did really well in the EQAO, then they might take some of that money away and put it somewhere else. And, and I know that happens in the States as well. It determines how much funding a school gets. And private schools in Toronto, they don't have to make their students write the test. So what they would do is they just get their brightest kids to write the test. So get like 7 kids to write the test out of the whole school and then say, hey, our school has an average of 95% on the EQAO, and they'll use it for marketing.
So, okay, so we've established traditional education is a scam, but you said something very interesting, which I really believe in, which is that it started off like many things with good intentions.
Yes.
I sort of feel like, and by the way, we're only on the cover of your book.
Yeah.
There's 101 chapters to go. Let me just read some chapter titles, and then this is a fear overcome is a strength acquired. I know I'm happier wanting less than getting more. Okay, I'll just read those two, just to set the tone that we're gonna get into some stuff. But I really like this understanding this concept that you feel like the whole world is now arguing us versus them, whatever side of the spectrum you sit on. But, I think nobody or very few people enter into a policy or a belief system with bad intentions.
Yeah.
Take you gave this education with you gave this example with education. So I could sound all smart saying, oh, education is ruining the lives of our children. But you have to respect the fact that someone started off with very good intentions. College might have very good intentions. Let's teach people like advanced engineering and medicine and all these things, or the arts and stuff. And so let's fund everybody to go to college, or let's back all their loans.
Yeah.
And then that's a great intention. Let's back all the loans, because the 18-year-olds normally can't get $250,000 in loans.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's bad outcomes, which is now someone graduates at 22 with $250,000 in loans. It's insane. I wouldn't even want to be in debt like that. And,
Well, that's a great motivator to get them to join the workforce very quickly.
Well, but it's a bad motivator to get them to be entrepreneurs and innovators because they can't take a risk. They've got to start paying back the loans or the government will go after them.
Exactly.
So it kind of ruins innovation. And it increases income inequality, because who then has the opportunity to create innovation and start companies, which is a true builder of wealth? Well, only the rich kids who didn't have the debt.
Exactly.
So that income inequality, again, good intention, but this amazingly large societally bad outcome of increasing income inequality. Like, people wonder, why is there so much income inequality? Well, I just gave you one example of a very clear example of why it could be huge.
Yeah.
And start with good intentions. Same thing with, I don't know, almost...
Same thing with film. You can get someone who has a beautiful film idea, and then all of a sudden they start pitching it to different people. And then when you pitch it to one person, like, hey, I can make some connections, but we're going to have to tweak the story to make it more malleable. And then the next person, like, we gotta water it down. And then when you get to the person who can finance the film, they're like, we got to make sure it works in China. So now we got to throw an A-list movie star behind it. And then all of a sudden, this pure, raw, authentic story that you originally started with has turned into this watered down pop culture, basic ass film for everyone else to enjoy.
Yeah, and I think, you see a lot of we've had a lot of people on it talking about this happening in TV, where all these great writers and directors make a great show, and then at the last minute, a bunch of MBAs come in and say, no, we need to make these 73 changes. And then you find the best sitcoms, when you really look into them, didn't allow executives in the room and block the notes. But they had to have a certain clout to do that.
I think it was
first.
The Simpsons, like the first one to have it in the contract, saying no outside interference.
Yeah, The Simpsons, but that was made by it was made by Matt Groening, but James L. Brooks was the top executive producer. He's the one who said no executives, and he came from he made Mary Tyler Moore. He made all these amazing sitcoms for a decade earlier. And of course, The Simpsons, I don't even know if the Fox network would have survived without The Simpsons. That was the first hit that they had.
Yeah.
So a little bit of TV history, which has nothing to do with the rest of our conversation. So, okay, no, we're not done with the cover yet. Unlearn. What are we unlearning? And of course, you quit being a school teacher. Tell us why.
So I was also I got into spoken word poetry after watching a spoken word poetry event, and I was like, this is super cool. It's really fun. I grew up in a Sikh household, and Sikhi is my heritage, and I learned hymns, hymns that were in Punjabi, and all the hymns were poetic and they were poetry. So I was rhyming in different languages since I was a child. And my mother used to bribe me with money to memorize these so she could, put me in front of other uncles and aunts and show off. So I always had rhythm, connotation. I always had energy and a little bit of theatrics in the way I spoke and everything. And when I saw spoken word poetry for the first time, or slam poetry, as some people see it, I fell in love with it. And I was like, A, I can do this. This is more exciting than just writing poetry in my notebook. And B, this would be a great way to meet girls. And
Why is that?
I feel like girls dig poetry, and seeing a guy on stage just looks, it was the simplest, cheapest way to be a rock star without having to spend 10 years learning the guitar. And
That's interesting. So let's talk about spoken word poetry for a second.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of skills. First off, I'm not a fan of spoken word poetry because I prefer you add the musical component, and now you have hip hop and rap, and which
which
I
is an
love.
evolution as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about spoken word poetry versus reading a poetry book.
Right. Okay. So which is interesting because I think there's a huge difference in skills where I do have respect on the spoken word side. Poetry is a difficult art form all by itself, but
Yeah.
then to do it spoken word, I don't know how long it takes, but you need to have great stage presence. You need to be able to, command a crowd and understand who's falling asleep, who's enjoying it, who's on texting on their phone, and
Yeah.
how do you from the stage kind of control what's happening? Like
Yeah.
how hard was that for you? Like what were the skills that you didn't realize you needed to learn to beyond poetry to be a good spoken word poet?
Controlling your breath. I think most people will, even if you're a rapper or you're a singer or anything, most people will rehearse in the garage, rehearse in their bedroom by themselves. They'll rehearse on the stage during sound check to an empty room by themselves. And then all of a sudden they'll be in a room full of people. It's a lot noisier. So now they're having trouble hearing themselves. So now they have to be a little bit louder. And they also lose their perception of how fast and slow they're going. So and because they're nervous, they go very, very, very quickly, and they speak really quickly. And then they lose their breath, and they can no longer perform it the way they performed it when nobody was around.
Would you have to consciously tell yourself, okay, slow it down. Let's just slow it down.
Really tell yourself, slow it down. I mean, and then as I got into music, I learned that, what they make you do is they make you run on the treadmill and perform. They make you run around the block and perform and see if you can maintain your breath, because that's what it is. So I'm talking about, reading up with different artists and finding out who, like, for example, Outkast. They had a musical mentor, and it was L.A. Reid when he had LaFace Records, and he would challenge them to run around the block and then come and spit 50 bars. And then it became the metaphor for going from amateur to pro, which was, you could say, get them to do their verse on the treadmill, which was, can you perform while you're running your fastest? And that's all of a sudden when you start watching stage performers who don't use any backtracking, who don't use anything, and they're just like, Beyonce is a perfect example. You go watch her Netflix special and just pay attention to the fact that she's never out of breath. And she is dancing and she is screaming and she's never losing her breath. She's never coughing. There's no issues. And I've seen her live and I'm just like, whoa, like the amount of shape you have to be in. But that's 4 to 6 months worth of rehearsals and training yourself to do it. So the number one thing I would remind people, if you want to go on stage, slow it down, because you will run out of breath. I think the second thing is, before you've clocked in enough hours on stage, don't worry about the audience. Right now, share an experience. The beauty of spoken word poetry is they get to hear it from the poet. The delivery, how you say the poetry, is 90% of the magic. What you say is the other 10%. And I liken it to.
What do you mean? Because do you mean kind of just the cadence and the rhythm? Like why is the actual story and the content only 10%?
Because if I wrote, even for example, when I wrote this book, for you to read it, you're gonna read it in whatever voice you think it sounds like. You're gonna emphasize whatever words you feel are important, unless we bolded them or what have you. Now, if you hear me say them, I might focus on different words, and I might focus on different points, and I might pause at different times, and all these little subtle things mean all the difference. So what I always tell people, because so often now that I've become popular, people are sending me poetry, and I always tell them, I'm saying, hey, you're sending me a picture of a pie, and you're asking me what it tastes like. It looks good, but I don't know what it tastes like. I don't know what the magic is. And I think realizing that, like where I would read a piece of poetry, and I'm thinking even in song lyrics, I read, I think it's Broken Souls by Radiohead. And it's just these fragmented sentences. And I'm just like, this makes no sense. But then when you hear him sing it, it's fragmented because he's so distraught that he can't finish his sentences. And that just adds so much more context to it. It gives it so much more life. So reading about somebody's heartbreak versus hearing them speak about it, it's almost a whole new dimension. You know, it's like experiencing this person in 3D. So I think if you're new and you're here to share your poetry, you know, share it the way you felt when you wrote it, and let people have that experience, because that vulnerability, that visceral experience is what's going to make people connect with you. Because what you're doing is you're sharing your story and in turn empowering people to figure out their own.
So when you left, so you quit being a teacher. Did you quit or were you fired? Like,
oh yeah, so this is the good stuff. What happened was I had no intentions of ever quitting. I'm like, I'm going to do this on the side. This is going to be fun. This is a great icebreaker to meet people. It's a cool way to keep life interesting outside of my 9 to 5. And it took a life of its own. So I first started with spoken word, and I'd put up a couple poems, and I would go to a couple readings, coffee shops, all of that stuff. And then when I kind of got not so inspired by the scene, and by not inspired, I wasn't winning any of the competitions and feeling like I wasn't getting my justice, I started focusing on putting stuff online. So I started doing spoken word poetry with just music in the background as ambiance. And then what ended up happening was I started picking hip hop beats, and then the spoken word started to click onto the beat. And that's how I realized that I was never really doing spoken word poetry. I was just rapping without music. And I began rapping and then putting out music, putting out lyrics videos, and putting out very small productions, you know, handheld Canon cameras, and just shooting music videos and putting them out. And in the South Asian world, nobody that looked like me, I mean, in the world, nobody that looked like me was doing this. In the South Asian world, there were no brown people doing anything on YouTube back then. And I just slowly became a little bit of a local celebrity. None of this was monetized. None of this was making me any money. And I didn't care. This was me. It was a hobby. This was a great way to crash a birthday party, and everybody already knew who I was, so I was welcome. A great way to get into clubs. Just purely selfish stuff. But my subject matter was, I used to get more and more serious with my subject matter and try to use it to communicate to the world. So I talked about what was happening in the world, what I saw in the news, anything I found interesting. And eventually, the music started getting me gigs, just small gigs, getting flown out to Edmonton, getting flown out to New York, getting flown out different places.
because the people would find you on YouTube
They'd find
and
me
say,
on YouTube. We're throwing an event, and we would love for you to be there. And the farther you go from home, the bigger of a deal you become. So I'd get flown out. I wouldn't get paid, but I'd get the free plane ticket. And to me, you know, that first year, I think it was 2009, I probably sat in an airplane more than I ever sat in my entire life before that. You know, before that was probably 3 trips. And that started building some momentum. And now I was getting recognized regularly, but again, still not earning. And then I connected with this music producer who I started making music with, and he was all in. He was just like, I'm all in. We're gonna figure out how to make money doing this. I've already made some money in Japan working with these hip hop artists. I'm gonna get you connected with them. We'll make some good money, and you can quit your job. And I was also at this point, it's 2009 and 2010. I was also, you know, as a young guy living at home, you know, I played in the stock market, lost a crap ton of money in 2008.
really, why? No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, we can watch The Big Short for that one, but so I had debt. I had a lot of debt, and it was manageable debt because I had a salary. So when he came to me, he goes, I got us a record deal. I got you 120 grand, and all you got to do is write 10 songs, and we're set. And I was like, this is awesome. And I immediately, and again, I looked at it not as an opportunity to explore my artistic career. I looked at this as the cavalry has come to save the day. That 120 grand is going to wipe out the 40 grand of debt I had. I'd have 80 grand to play with. Plus, I can be a weirdo artist all day and go for long walks and be inspired. So I quit my job. Moved out of my house. I had an investment property, another wise decision a younger version of me made. Kicked my tenant out, moved into there, and started making music. And it took about a year of denial for me to realize that no money was ever coming. And I was just digging myself deeper into debt.
Why do you think? I mean, I've seen a bunch of your latest videos got like, 2.5 million views, and it's a rap video, and it's really professionally done. It's great. And you're a great rapper. And What was going on? What do you think is the dynamic where you weren't? What was the next step to break out, you think?
Well, back then, I had no idea how anybody in music made money. I had no idea. I thought you get signed to a record company and they just hit you over the head with a bag of money and that was it. I had a very simplistic view of all of this. And I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't, the same way I did no due diligence with whatever stocks I bought and I lost all my money, I did no due diligence when it came to this deal. I just got an email PDF sent to me, signed the paper, and just was waiting for the money to come in. It was, I wasn't manipulated by a master. I was just told what I wanted to hear. And I was thirsty to leave what I considered a normal life to have this better. And I was going through some transitions. I lost one of my best friends. We had a falling out. A girl I was dating for a year and a half, she moved halfway across the world and broke up with me. Plus the financial hardships, plus me seeing artists and feeling like they were more free than me. In the beginning, I always kind of pitied artists. And I was like, you guys are all broke and you guys can't make a living and you guys have to take stupid gigs just to pay your bills. At least I'm good with this teacher stuff. And I was living at home. I didn't really have any big bills back then. And the next thing I know, from the end of 2010 to the end of 2011, I just accrued much more debt. And now I'm sitting there $80,000 in debt. This $120,000 check doesn't exist. I have no way of making money.
Why didn't it exist? Because it was just not.
From what I understand now, because I never went too deep into it, because I was in recovery mode and I didn't have enough time to stare at the broken pieces. I don't think the deal ever existed. I think he really believed in my talents and he thought he could leverage it eventually to get some sort of money. And what I think he was trying to do was borrow like 25 grand from a friend and use that on me and then borrow
like an
money.
advance.
Yeah, like kind of create a little bit of a Ponzi scheme, I guess, and eventually somebody would actually come with the 120. But it wasn't there at that time. He just doctored. Somebody paid him $5,000 once to make a beat, and he just doctored that, and it looked official because he just changed the number and he changed the name on the contract. I don't think it was malicious, but I think once he realized he got exposed, instead of having an adult conversation with me, he took off and he just went into hiding.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. So now you've quit your job, you've got the debt. And this kind of, before we get into the title of like why you called it Unlearn, I think there's a lot of things in this book that are related to trying to be great at something and perhaps, along the way, dealing with the various disappointments that can result. Disappointment financially, disappointment that people aren't looking at you the way you would have liked in terms of validation, disappointment in terms of the skill acquisition might not be coming as quickly as you want, various disappointments. And I think we're all disappointed in life, particularly the harder we work for something. It means it's worth working for. It means it's difficult. It means we're going to suck for a while because it's worth getting good at. Like, for instance, I just randomly opened to a chapter 20 here. You can be whatever the fuck you want. So it strikes me that maybe people were telling you, maybe while you're writing this, you're thinking, maybe people were telling you, no, you can't be a rapper, you can't be a musician, you need this, or you need to be in LA or New York or whatever. And so tell me what this chapter means.
I think, definitely when we think about, Biggie dedicating a song to the teachers that said he wouldn't amount to much, you always think about, and I always thought to myself, I was like, man, I know a lot of teachers. Teachers don't say that to kids. Nobody said to me, like, you're not good enough, you can't do it. What they do is they do a lot more passive aggressively. They'll be like, can you make money doing that? is that don't you think you should lean into something more realistic? What if you get like a full-time gig and just do that on the side? Like a lot of, slowly chipping away at your dreams and trying to say these types of things.
Or the worst is, really congratulate you. You're really brave that you're trying this.
Yeah, really brave that you're trying this. And what happened was when I got to that $80,000 of debt and realized that, shit, I don't have any way to pay this. I have a mortgage payment coming up. And I have no outs. I don't know what to do. It was the scariest situation of my life. And I isolated myself from everybody. I didn't talk to anybody. I avoided people because I not only owed the bank money, I owed friends money. I owed people money like that I cared about. I didn't want to be that guy who ran away. Somebody just ran away on me. Somebody that I considered a brother at this point. And I didn't want to be that guy. But I ended up spending 2 months I ended up spending 2 weeks in bed just taking a bunch of whatever I could find and just medicating and avoiding the world. And that wasn't helping. And there were a lot of good friends in my life at that point that were saying good things to me. Like, you're going to have to sell this place. Like, you can't keep these payments up. You can't even afford to rent this out again because you need an income. And I would be like, see, you don't believe in me. You guys don't believe in me. Or they're like, hey, we saw in his behavior that he wasn't worth trusting, and you knew that, and you ignored that, and me being like, why are you blaming me for this? This isn't my fault, and really pushing back, and then until I eventually had some rest, had some time to grieve over this, and then finally had my adult moment where I was like, no one's gonna save the day. I got to figure this out, and I am sick of hearing the stupid motivational quotes because Tumblr's not helping me today, and I'm going to be honest, I heard about this guy named James Altucher who got rich and then went broke and got rich again and then went broke and now lives a life of minimalism. And as I said, I read your story, then I read, your article on self-publishing. I read about your nomadic ways. I read about your minimalism ways before the word minimal was even cool. And I was like, this is the first guy who's just honest about it and who's not embarrassed. And that was one of the first steps, in me just telling people, like, I fucked up. I don't know what I did, but I don't know what to do, but I fucked up and I sold the place. I moved back home with my parents. I listened to a lot of I told you so's, and I ate it. I had to take these consequences. I focused on taking personal responsibility. Even if somebody betrayed me, even if somebody lied to me, I didn't see any value anymore in feeling like a victim. I think for a long time, I enjoyed the pity that I got. I enjoyed people feeling sorry for me. But now I got to a point where people's pity isn't going to pay the bills. People's empathy isn't going to help me move further right now. I need to take all the responsibility I can.
It's interesting because you look at stories of successful people or, people who are striving for success. No one ever says, man, what really made me a success was being a victim.
Yeah.
I really took that victim thing and just took it to the top.
Yeah, I ran with it. Everyone felt sorry for me and they just hit me with bags of money.
Yeah, like no one, victimhood is never a strategy.
Yeah.
So
it's addictive, but it's not.
It's addictive because it's a way to relieve stress. Like you're feeling the stress like, am I a failure? Because that's really stressful. Oh no, I'm just a victim. So that relieves the stress.
Like I was a good guy. They all lied to me. Right. I didn't do anything wrong here. Until I had my adult moments, which was like, yes, you did. You listened to a person's words and you ignored their actions.
So what does this chapter mean? You can be whatever the fuck you want.
So this is the point where I started coming up with ideas and having these little internal voices in my head trying to talk me out of it. You come up, and this is everybody. You say, I'm going to go to the gym. And then 2 minutes later, your mind's like, should we eat breakfast first? Maybe we need to buy new shoes before we actually go. Is our gym membership even, renewed? And we say all this shit, and then we talk ourselves out of it. And the reality is, be mindful of those voices talking yourself out of it. And you can legitimately be whatever the fuck you want to be. If you want to be a rapper, then go ahead and be a rapper. If you want to be an aerospace engineer, you can be that. You can be whoever you want to be. And your biggest obstacle is yourself and the voices that you've carried along. Whether it was somebody that said something to you when you were a child and that stuck with you and you didn't understand it when you heard it as a child and now you've just carried it into adulthood. It's about learning about yourself. And that's why the book's called Unlearn, is because it's about letting go of old, stale ideas that we've just been carrying around as baggage.
And again, those ideas, I'm fixated on this, but those ideas had good intentions. Your parents wanted you to be comfortable. They wanted you to be safe.
Yes.
Okay, the best way for you to be safe, don't try to be a trapeze artist.
Yeah.
Like, you want to be a trapeze artist? How about you just play soccer at school
Yeah.
and then study hard and be a lawyer?
Yeah, because my parents came to this country in the 70s, and what they understood made money were doctors, lawyers, and engineers. And we always make the joke that that's one job now, doctor, lawyer, engineer.
Right.
You know, and I feel like any child of an immigrant from anywhere around the world have had this experience where, you know, but they have the best intentions. They're not sitting there like, how do we crush our child's spirits today? They're saying, how do we maintain our bloodline and thrive in this new country that we barely understand?
I think it's an important thing to understand to also avoid the victim thing. Like, if you understand that even if you don't know why somebody planted some education in you that might be stale, they probably had good intention doing it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to understand why. You could just say, look, they had good intentions, but now I need to have an adult moment and do what I want to do. And to your point of, like, anyone could be a rapper, not everyone's going to be, you know, Eminem, but anyone could play some music, write some poetry, good or bad, and rap to it.
Yeah.
And then you could do it again the next time, and you're probably a tiny bit better than the first time, and so on.
And if you have fun making it, then you win. If the reward comes through the work, and you know, and you're just enjoying the rainbow and you're not even thinking about a pot of gold, then you've already won. That's what 90% of the people haven't even realized yet.
And you know, somebody can say, well, but you also just said aerospace engineer. Like, clearly you need education. But then you look at, like, Elon Musk, you know, people think, oh, the guy just hired a bunch of physicists. No, he read for like years physics books and engineering books to kind of know who to hire and evaluate the designs and evaluate how to hire people. And you know, he's in there every day, you know, working on this. So,
and it's such a beautiful time now, because right now your portfolio is worth more than your resume. So if you want to be, you know, a graphic designer, you don't have to go to school for graphic design. You just have to make dope stuff and then show people your dope stuff, and then they'll hire you to do the dope stuff. They're not asking for the degree anymore.
It's funny because I have 5 kids, and explaining this to kids is, they don't believe it. They say, no, you need the degree for the first couple of jobs. And I'm like, no,
even your kids?
Yeah,
even with your story, with everything you do?
I wrote a book, 40 Alternatives to College. and I even go to my kids and say, I will pay you cash instead of going to college. And look here, I send them articles. Here, Google, and I don't argue with them. I Google, no longer looking at degrees. Ernst & Young, the accounting firm, no longer looking at degrees. Microsoft, no longer looking at degrees. Who's looking at degrees? And they're like, no. If you want to get a job, they're going to ask at some point, and you're going to lose to the person who has a degree.
It sounds like the university's got like little lobbyists working in the elementary schools.
Well, that's just it. It's the student loan industry started with good intentions. Let's help students get a higher education. Is a multi-trillion-dollar industry now. So the force is strong in terms of, you know, getting into kids' heads. From
debt is a great motivator. It's a better motivator than a whip.
Yeah,
you want to get people to
ways.
work. Yeah, you want to get people to work. Put them in debt.
Yeah, and so from the teachers to the guidance counselors to the college counselors, like, it's all this, and of course, they're conditioned. And look, you saw this probably as a school teacher. They're conditioned to pay much more attention to their peers than their parents, because they're, you know, 70,000 years ago, someone my age was dead.
Yeah.
And they need to bond with their peers more than with their parents if they want to survive the lions and the tigers. And our DNA is the same as then. So they're not listening to me. Their friends are like worried about their SAT scores, so they're worried about their SAT scores, and that just happens.
And that was the thing, even when I taught the 3rd grade, is like some of these kids would be focusing in October about that EQAO test, and then the parents would be like, yeah, so they want me to ask you to give them their prep book early. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, you're a kid. Like, literally, this is inconsequential. They're testing me. And I tell Aglo, they're testing me more than they're testing you. You're just going to be a stat on a sheet. And the thing is, it's the template. There's been this template, which is do well in school, get a good job, then you can find a great mate, you can have children, and you can pressure them to do well in school so they can get a good job and they can find a good mate. And that's why this book's called Unlearn. It's like, hey, let's just even entertain the idea that there's another way by letting go of this script that hasn't been updated for decades.
Right, and you can be whatever the fuck you want. I think is an interesting concept in a lot of ways. In every industry, again, I'm talking about industries worth learning. So there's no tic-tac-toe industry because tic-tac-toe is not really interesting to learn.
But there could be.
Well,
You never know.
maybe, but it's there's a forced win for whoever moves first, so it's a little too easy. But for something like rap or tennis or investing or entrepreneurship, it's so difficult, the skills, that you have to be okay with failing and sucking for a while.
Yes.
And B, you're going to have gatekeepers who tell you, we don't like you.
Yes.
So it won't be the most successful people in the industry. It'll be like the second tier because they want to be the first tier and you're potentially going to pass them. So the second tier of hard industries hate the bottom tiers.
Yes.
Because they still don't know where they are. Whereas the first tiers, they could be gracious or you never reach them or whatever. But, like books, and you originally self-published this book. Books is a great one. In the U.S., there's like 4 or 5 big publishing companies. It's very easy for 5 random people who had a bad day that day to say no to you. And then you used to be able to think, well, okay, I guess I can't write a book. But now you wrote this book without a publisher and you self-published it originally.
Yes. And I want to shout out my friend Baraj Dillon for putting me onto you. He just, for your email list, he just signed me up.
That's really funny. And I had no idea.
Yeah, and that was the thing. And even when, I got the first email about booking this and I sent it to him and he was just like, that's so beautiful that things are full circle. And for him, and again, he's a great friend of mine. And when I needed money, he put money in my hands. And he was one of the reasons that I called up and said, look, I owe you money. I'm not going to avoid giving you money. And I'm proud to say I was able to pay him back and not have any damage in our friendship. And it's been motivating to prove these type of people right. And being able to shout them out on the podcast after.
That's great. I mean, and look how it worked out for you. You self-published this book. You became a writer. You have no music label maybe is throwing a bag of money at you, but you have great rap videos
now
on
they
YouTube.
Now they are. So
that's good.
Yeah, that's the thing. Everything starts, and that's been the new challenge where it's like, oh, my new challenge is kind of like the end of Scott Pilgrim, where he's like, you have to face yourself. Like my new challenge is like, Humble the Rapper just got a deal, and the paperwork's in an email, and it's legit, and the head of their legal department has been a friend for 5 years, so I know it's pretty good. But then everyone's like, well, Humble the author is doing really well. Focus on the book, and then do the music later. And then me, the kid in me, is just like, no, we're going to do it all. And let's just see what happens and have as much fun as possible.
You have to do it all.
Yeah.
You can't do one without the other.
And that's what I did with this advance check. I was like, oh, now I can afford to shoot a cinematic video and not worry if it gets 2.5 million views or if it gets 10,000 views. And now it's the labor of love and I can have fun with it. And then the irony of that is people can see the fun and then more opportunities find me because of that.
Yeah, and did the record deal or music deal you get, did that come from the YouTube videos?
Yeah, so first in 2014, I worked on a track with Lily, and then that track blew up, and then we got deal offers from everybody, but they were clearly uneducated on the YouTube space, and they thought we were one-hit wonders, and they didn't realize, like, no, we built a big trampoline that we can bounce anything off of, and the platform is what brings it value. So, your label isn't going to do that. So all those talks fell short. And then most recently, I've been partnering with some of the streaming services. So the great people at Apple, like, you want to do something exclusive. You want to work on something. We can get you on these playlists because I ended up doing an Apple commercial 2 years ago. So I got kind of brought into that family. There's a big streaming service out in India called Saavn that's getting a lot of American investment now. They're really working to kind of bridge the cultures of South Asia and North America. And a guy like me is a perfect fit for that because I'm exotic everywhere I go. I stand out there, I stand out here, and I grew up wanting to rap with Nas. I didn't grow up rapping in a different language. So, now all these things are possible. And as my following increases and as I become more of a name in the mainstream ethos, whether it's for the book or my other music, everything's starting to make more sense for them to get involved.
What's interesting to me there is I think a lot of people don't know when to do hard things and don't know when they should focus on easy things. And so a hard thing would be let's make a lot of money as a rapper before we really have the skills and the audience. That would be a really hard thing.
Yeah.
An easy thing is, okay, I didn't get the deal I wanted, but I could still today improve as a musician.
Yes.
And there's a lot of ways I can improve as a musician. I can learn an instrument, I can sing, I can write better lyrics, I could rap better, I could learn to breathe better, I could perform better. So there's lots of ways to improve and things you can actually do. And then what was previously hard, when it becomes, if you keep doing that, what was previously hard becomes easy, or you find another direction to go. Like you wrote this book. So you diversified your opportunities to find something easy.
And
I think that's
all
the key.
these seeds were planted so long ago. It's like when I wrote the book and I self-published it, and I looked at the economics of it, it was like, oh, wait, so these are print to order. So now I don't have to keep boxes and boxes in my place and ship them out individually. Somebody orders that off Amazon. I get the royalties and we're straight. Now also I can use, and I crowdfunded the book initially. Now I love this crowdfunding process because it takes the guesswork out of things. So I started crowdfunding my shows. So I said, hey, Edmonton, I want to come perform, but I'm not going to even begin exploring a venue or setting the show up until we pre-sell 50 tickets. And now come on my Indiegogo, and here we go. For $15, you get a ticket. For $35, you get a ticket and a signed book. You know, for $100, you get a ticket, a signed book, and a T-shirt. For $500, your company presents Humble the Poet live in Edmonton.
So by the way, and just to mention, you crowdfunded the advance on when you self-published this book too. So people don't, I think there's a kind of a good tactical thing here. People don't realize crowdfunding is not about raising money so then you can do your thing. Crowdfunding is really about, it's about building that first customer base too, that first loyal customer base. People don't realize there's a human behind the funding, and it's not just these mysterious random people paying you and you never interact with them again. Those are your first customers, and you know what crowdfunding proves is that you have customers.
It proves you have customers, and it's also a lot of growth. So for me, you know, I didn't want to do it because it was like I'm asking for help. And again, at this point in my evolution, I was way too proud to do so. And the moment I was able to admit to people that I am struggling, so when people are like, hey, oh my God, I saw a cool picture of you on social media doing something cool. I was like, yeah, but I did that for free. And I'm still struggling financially. I had to move back home, but I'm figuring it out. And I really was figuring it out. Crowdfunding let me put it out there and be like, hey, you guys, the top comments on all my posts are, you should write a book. I don't know how to write a book. I don't know how to make a book. I don't want to try to chase a deal, because if you're chasing the deal, you've lost all your leverage and you're going to get a really bad deal.
Well, and again, it's chasing the deal is doing the hard thing instead of backing up and writing the book, which is the easy thing.
So I think in addition to finding your customer base, it actually made them all stakeholders. So it's
Right.
like, I don't know how to do this. I need your guys' help to do this. And the largest single contribution I got was $1,500. So 300 people donated. So it wasn't a lot of people. It was 300 people. I did a 6-week campaign. 300 people contributed, and I raised over $26,000.
Okay, but I'll say two things. One is, in the U.S., a $26,000 advance for a book is probably 4 or 5 times higher than the average first-time author advance for a book.
1,000%. Yeah.
And the second thing is, 300 customers, I think the average book in the US, the average published book from a traditional mainstream publisher sells 300 copies. So you already kind of were exceeded the expectations if you traditionally published.
And again, that came from me. I was still, even though I wasn't earning any money in 2011, I was still putting out art. And I was still building a relationship with my community and letting them know I put out dope stuff. And, at this point, because I thought I had money coming in from this invisible deal that never existed, I was putting out my music for free download. It wasn't even on iTunes. It was just like, hey, go to humbletopoet.com and download this for free. So I had built a following. And it was also the golden years of social media where, I had 60,000 followers on Facebook. 60,000 people saw the message. This was before they
now 3 people would see the message.
Maybe, yeah. Or maybe
unless
3 people
you boosted it.
Yeah, unless you boost, and then 5 people will see it.
Yeah.
So so what ended up happening was, you're right, and I did the math, and I was like, all right, for 300 people to want to contribute, maybe up to 30,000 people will have to see the messaging. And I just went on a 1% thing and I pushed it and pushed it. And the largest contributions I got were from either people I had only known for less than 6 months. And the single largest contribution was $1,500 from a Harvard professor who I had never met. And that 50, in Indiegogo, you can give little thresholds. So if you give me, I said it was like, you give me $5, you'll get a digital copy of the book. I think it was $20, you'll get a physical copy. And I just kept going up. And I'm like, if you give me $1,500 and you live in North America, I'll come to your house and perform. So I actually went to his house and I performed for a bunch of Harvard professors. And he gave me a tour of the campus. And then when he showed me his office, he had a big sign in there from Andy Warhol that said, business is the greatest type of art. And he goes, I contributed to your campaign because I got so happy to see an artist taking business into their own hands. I had no choice at that point because I was broke and I had to figure out how to do it. But I realized I was acquiring all these little breadcrumbs from so many people and getting to sit in a Harvard business class, and just being like, okay, these are the resources that are worth more than money. This is somebody I can lean on because he crowdfunds and he crowdsources, but he does it for NASA. And he doesn't raise money, he raises knowledge. NASA calls him to solve a math equation, and he puts that out to his network of nerds to solve it, and then he gives them $25,000 if they solve the problem, and then everybody's happy in that equation.
Were you nervous in the seconds before performing at his house that, oh my God, this guy, wants me to perform here. He's got all these Harvard professors. He gave me $1,500. What if I perform and I just look at their faces and they're all just like, what the heck did we just fund?
Yeah, I think the beautiful part about it was he said, if you come, stay at my house. So I stayed with him for 2 days before the actual performance. And then I realized he's a big hip hop fan. And he's been flexing his Harvard muscles for the longest time. So he's like, yeah, I got Nas 2 weeks ago to do a keynote speech. I got Rick Rubin to come out here. So it's like, so you're a hip hop fan who's been, using your resources to have the coolest experiences at your school. So I realized, so that took a lot of pressure off of it. And his entire team, everybody he brought to the house, it just turned to a big fun evening. So everybody was super cool. And
so again, like kind of, not necessarily avoiding hard things, but knowing, when to back off from the difficult things in order to do the easy things to improve so that the difficult things become easier. That kind of experience was like a compass leading you to, all these experiences where you, getting crowdfunded for a book, performing for these Harvard professors, one who's, had all these contacts in the industry, kind of like not necessarily taking the easy path, but understanding which path was more important for you at which time was a real critical part of the success here.
And it was leaning into the fear, because I realized the only reason up until that moment, that 2 weeks after when I got out of bed, I had always been about cutting corners. I had the academic ability. To be a doctor. And it would have gotten done. And it wouldn't have killed me, as some of my friends describe med school as being self-inflicted torture. I think I would have been able to make it happen. And I had always sold myself short and used my intelligence to try to take the easy way. And I realized the easy way was always away from the scary way. It was just, a sharp left away from anything that scared me or felt uncomfortable. And all growth exists outside our comfort zone. So now I look down on struggling artists. When I was working as a teacher and I met artists who were full-time artists, I'm like, I don't envy you. You guys have to do the weirdest things to pay your bills. It sucks. Y'all can't eat out today. I'm in a better situation and I'm comfortable and I like it. Life turned me into that. I became a starving artist, not by choice. I didn't adopt minimalism. I became a minimalist because I had to get rid of everything. And then hearing your story about having a backpack, and if you buy one thing, you got to get rid of another. Like realizing that was my budget. It wasn't my philosophy.
Right.
It was, you're only going to buy something when something breaks and you have to do it. And budgeting in that at least once a month, you're going to have to swipe that credit card for something that hurts, that you didn't plan to. Maybe you went out to dinner with somebody and the bill got bigger than you wanted it to be. Or maybe you got to catch a flight that you didn't think you'd have to. Or maybe you got to make an investment in yourself. And I tried other things that stuck against the wall. I tried to start a website, a little social community for the South Asian community. I spent 15 grand on that out of that condo money. That all went to waste, and I'd worked on a couple other things as well. But then a lot of the seeds I planted slowly started to grow. So once I started getting into music and my name started getting a little bit bigger, I had a book under my belt and it was independently published and I was selling exactly 3 copies a day. Every single week, I was making about $7 a book, and my royalties every week were about $28, $21, that range. And that in combination with making $300-400 a gig at the time, in combination with putting words together, writing a really good grant application, and maybe getting $3,000 to make my next album, in combination with working with popular YouTubers out in LA who wanted to get into music but had no talent, so they'd pay me to write their stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So just finding every single avenue of trying to get money and learning this and meeting this a local rapper in LA, him being like, look, bro, it's not about what you do on stage. It's about how you make people feel, and then you sell your t-shirts afterwards. And he goes, I make more money selling merch than even the headliners make. And he goes, make sure you have merchandise. Give people something to walk home with. And I always felt t-shirts were a ripoff. So I used the book. And the book, had a great profit margin for me, but it also held value. And then slowly my shows stopped being people there for the music, and it became people there for the book. And this is still independent. And then when I got on to this show called Canada Reads, where I was a local Canadian celebrity at this point, and they had me, read 5 books, pick one I like, and just debate 4 other celebrities about who their favorite book was, I ended up winning the debate. And this is like Survivor for books, and it's on the radio, and it's a big deal in Canada, even though I hadn't heard of it.
What books were you debating for?
I ended up choosing a book. So they sent me 3 boxes of books, and every single book was about the immigrant experience or racism. And then there was one book in there called 15 Dogs, and this book was about 2 Greek gods in a bar in Toronto having a simple debate: does being smart make you miserable? And then they end up having a bet saying whoever wins the bet, the other one's going to be their slave for 200 years. We're going to make another animal super smart, and let's see if any of them can die happy. And they go to a local animal shelter and give 15 dogs human intelligence. And the entire book is about 15 super intelligent dogs roaming around Toronto, and you're just following them until they die. And it was short, and my favorite things are my city of Toronto and dogs. I love dogs. So I picked it because I actually like these things. Whereas all my competition, there was an opera singer, there was a war veteran, there was an actress, and there was a radio host. They all picked books that reflected them. The radio host was in the LGBTQ community. She picked a book about that. One of the singers was of Native descent. She picked a book about a Native woman. So they really were advocating for their own stories, where I was just picking a book that I thought was the most interesting.
That's also the craziest book concept I've ever heard.
It's dope. I'm gonna read that.
15 Dogs.
You'll
Who wrote
love it. Huh? It's written by Andre Alexis. And the book had already, and I didn't know the book world at this point. The book had already won a boatload of awards. It won the Giller Prize, which is like a Pulitzer in Canada. So this guy had already accumulated at least $1 million in literary prizes. I didn't know any of this. I picked it because it was thin and looked interesting. And I won the debate. And I used a lot of my teacher talk. I went in depth, and I never got heated when people insulted the book because it wasn't my book. Everybody else got, one person had a book on global warming. And they said, if
you can't.
Yeah, if you don't like this book, then you must not believe in global warming. And I was like, or I care about global warming, but I feel like this book is a very boring way to talk about it, and really being able to separate that. So I won. And once I won that show, the publishing industry looked me up and oh, he already has a book under his belt. Maybe we can capitalize off this and sign him for a new book. So I spoke with all the publishers, all the big companies, but just the Canadian versions. And they all said, hey, we want to sign you to a book deal. And I'm like, hey, I wrote a book that's doing very well independently. It's been keeping me afloat for the last 2 years. You guys want to republish it and bounce it off your trampoline and let's see where it goes? And they all said no. And then at this point, I had done some other stuff as well as that show got me discovered by a couple of ad agencies. I started doing some ads for companies. I did an Apple commercial. It was very fun. It was an iPhone commercial. I did spoken word poetry.
I'm just curious, did they pay well for that?
They pay well.
All right, good.
Yeah. I mean, they paid me enough. I was living very simply, but they gave me enough money to live for 2.5 years.
That was great.
You know, off my simple minimalist lifestyle. So for me, I was like, hey, I'm good. I'm going to reward myself by making music. And then so when the publishers weren't willing to republish the book, I just said, that's cool. You know, good luck to you guys. I'm going to just keep making my music. And then the biggest bookstore in Canada, the biggest book chain, Chapters Indigo, they reached out after one of their executives saw me on TV, and he was at a restaurant that one of my childhood friends owns. And he was just like, oh, this guy's interesting. And that guy's like, I know him. And then they connected us. And they're like, hey, we would love to republish this book as is. Just send us a PDF and we'll just change the cover. Because I had built the book. Somebody in my community taught me how to use Adobe InDesign. So I built the book. I put the chapters, the fonts, and everything. And the book had spelling mistakes and nobody cared. And then they just took the same version of the book, spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes and all, and then they put it on their shelves and it became an instant bestseller, stayed on the list. Globe and Mail, which is our big newspaper, stayed on the list for 9 months. And then that success is what got me on the radar with the Americans. And now I got an agent out here and he made it clear that you can't get him for another book unless you republish this one. And that's when I was like, look, this has been a 5-year journey for this book. It has continually proven it has legs. People are connecting with it. People can open this book up to literally any page and find something they connect with. It's to the point where I've disconnected myself from the book. I'm a fan of the book. I don't even look at myself as the guy who wrote it. And I was like, look, this book saved my life. I wrote this book this was my therapy to get out of my dark place and develop I call it the adult mind. I feel like this is the mind that all adults need to have, to develop my mindset to get out of the hardest situation I've ever been in my life. Plus, once I finished it, I was able to monetize off of it for the last 5 years independently. Then in Canada, it sold more copies in 1 month. In Canada, which isn't a big market, it sold more copies in 1 month than I sold in the previous 3 years. And I was like, this book has legs. Just keep giving me new trampolines to bounce it off of, and I'll show you how high it can go. And again, I can even see it with these publishers in terms of after a week and a half, we were on our 3rd print. Oh. You know, so they were very modest with how many they printed.
So we're gonna keep trying it. I'm gonna open it up, like you said,
right,
to random.
We're on 48.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.